Hello, everyone, and welcome into FCC Talk. I am your host, Jon Rhoades, the Children and Family Minister here at First Christian Church, and back with us once again, is the Worship Minister here at First Christian Church, Dan Stribling. Dan, how you doing today?
I am fantastic. How are you doing, Jon?
I'm doing well. It's, we record these on Thursdays,
Awesome.
sometimes Wednesdays, so it's a nice Thursday here, and
Yep.
my parents are going to be here this weekend for Labor Day, so that should be
Oh,
fun. And
cool.
yeah, all kinds of good stuff. There's college football on tonight, which I know you'll be locked into.
What? What is that? What is college football? You have to explain this concept to me.
Figure. Before we get started, I just want to remind you what FCC Talk is. FCC Talk is just discussion about Christian news events that are going on around America. Sometimes we stretch, for missions and things like that, but mostly here in America, we don't talk politics. You can get all that stuff anywhere and everywhere else other than here, so we don't engage in that. But this isn't necessarily a sermon. It's just us kind of talking about what's going on and giving maybe some of our ministry insights, things about working at a church and things with our personal lives. We probably will incorporate some Bible at some point, but that doesn't necessarily mean this is a sermon. This isn't us, telling you exactly everything you have to do with your life. Do it this way or else things are bad. It's just
Right.
us having a conversation about stuff. So
This is just what we happen to think. Yep.
Exactly. We hope you enjoy the conversation and we'll get started. So, Dan, the very first thing I want to talk about, and I realize this isn't a college football show. All right, I'm not confused with what podcast I'm on. However, this story was being shared by a number of evangelists, pastors that I follow on social media, and sometimes that's kind of how I pick these stories is, what's trending, what are people talking about? So I was like,
Sure. What's
well,
relevant?
yeah, I was like, if they're talking about it, it must be relevant. So if you're not a college football fan, I apologize, but Ohio State, they have a very good football team this year. They're expected to be one of the teams that could win the national championship. They're good every year, but this year in particular, they're very good. One of the reasons why is because they had a bunch of players come back. So you can go to the NFL after 3 years in college, or you can come back for your fourth year. And a lot of players who would have been good enough to play in the NFL decided to come back because they want to win a national championship. Well, three of those players who decided to come back just so happened to be very strong Christians, three of them being TreVeyon Henderson, a running back on the team, Emeka Egbuka, a wide receiver on the team, and G. Scott Jr., a tight end on the team. And there's other ones that are in here, but these were kind of the three main organizers of the event. They organized a Sunday evening event on campus. It's kind of like the central part of campus where they set up a stage, they set up musical equipment, they brought out like the baths that the football team normally does, like their ice baths in, but they just filled them with water instead of ice. And they started doing just public baptisms on the campus. So people got up to speak. It was mostly worship and just music, but the article says that anywhere from 800 to 1,000 people congregated to watch Ohio State football players facilitate a Christian baptism ceremony. And I mean, this isn't the first time this happens. Obviously, I'm an Ohio State football fan, so I see this stuff more often. One of these guys, G. Scott, he actually went to what's the church in Columbus? You've been there, Dan. It's the really, really big one. I'm forgetting what it's called.
Is it Rock City?
Yes, that's it.
Okay.
It's one of the ones like that. Anyway,
or Harvest, maybe could be Harvest.
Could. He actually got the chance to be the preacher for one Sunday. At that place. So
yeah, they do guest speakers all the time. Yeah.
It was really cool for him. He baptized, I think, 4 of his teammates that Sunday. And
cool.
So, here they're baptizing students on campus. Just a really, really cool thing for the campus and the team and everything going on. And the coach was asked about it in his press conference the other day, and he just talked about how proud he was. And I mean, in a world where, you've heard a lot about college athletes, going off and partying and doing anything and everything. I mean, we've all
that's
been
the normal
shit at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Mhm.
we know what those temptations are and maybe what our friends
Yep.
indulged in, or maybe even we indulged in. It's a little bit unheard of to hear, especially like these are football players, the most popular
Right.
guys
These
on
are high
campus.
profile guys. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
These are
These are
not
guys
just
honestly should be in the NFL, but they decided to come
not
back.
people that had my status. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they're not 5'8" like me. And so, Dan, I know you're not a huge football fan, but just from your kind of outside perspective looking in, what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on this story? Obviously, you read the article, but from
Yeah.
my telling, and maybe if there's anything I didn't mention that you want to mention.
I just think it's really cool. To me, it just stands out as another example of the fact that God is moving and he's a lot bigger than me. Because sometimes we have a tendency, at least I have a tendency, to sort of see things in my own little circle. And when I get a window into something like this, it's just a good reminder that, you know what, God works in all different kinds of ways, through all different kinds of people, through all different levels of influence. And I just think it's awesome. God doesn't stop and he works everywhere. Super cool.
Yeah, I scrolled down to some of the quotes. I couldn't find them, but while you were talking, I found one quote in particular I felt like was really impactful. One of the other players that was there, his name is JT Tuimoloau, which that's a mouthful. Trying to say that
Yes,
10
yeah.
times fast. Um, he said, "I don't think anything I accomplish on the field compares to what is happening right now." And just
Wow.
kind of
Yeah.
that sentiment from him. I mean, this is a guy that's going to go to the NFL someday. He's going to have a long career
Right.
in football, and for him to be able to say, nothing that happens on that field is more impactful than what's going on right now. Um,
Mhm.
Dan, when I first read this story, I first started thinking about, like that Asbury revival that happened. I think we talked,
Yeah.
I don't know if we
Mhm.
talked about it with you, but I talked about it with somebody else
Yeah.
about a year ago that happened on the Asbury campus and kind of what's going on there. I forget exactly how long that lasted for. Obviously, they're not, going through the night like these are here, but, this is definitely something that could persist with these players on campus and continue to happen. I
Sure.
mean,
I sure hope
I,
so. That'd be cool.
yeah, I mean, I don't know how you define a revival, Dan, but could you see this kind of being like a little bit of a mini revival on an Ohio State campus, a state college? I mean, this isn't even a private university or anything
Yeah,
that's
I
faith
know.
based. I mean,
This
could you
is an
see something like that
enormous
happening?
public university. I mean, I don't know if I could see it happening. I would sure hope that it would happen. I mean, once again, God is obviously doing a work there, and I think that that's fantastic. It's a social circle that I'm completely unfamiliar with, and so I don't really know how all that would work together. Could it lead to a revival? Sure, of course it could lead to a revival. It all depends on what God chooses to do and how receptive the people are to Him in what He is trying to do. Revivals are a little bit tricky because I remember when everybody was all getting fired up about the Asbury revival, and they were calling it a revival. The problem with the revival is you don't really know if it's a revival till you see what was revived. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You can't really tell if it was a revival until you see the after effects, because if a revival happens and nothing changes, it wasn't really a revival. It was just it doesn't mean it wasn't an impactful good time of worship or whatever, but revival's probably the wrong word to use. However, I mean, the world is a dark place, and I think a lot of these big universities, there is a great deal of darkness there, just like there is everywhere, in the world. But it seems to me like to kind of the spiritual warfare angle of things, it seems to me like Satan has really targeted universities. You know what I mean? He really,
Okay.
really wants to control, like to influence the minds of young people, for a very good reason. And to see the Lord working in those spaces and doing things like this, awesome. I hope it continues.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think we could attest that, Satan has been working trying to do this kind of stuff or
Hmm.
against universities and stuff like that forever now, whether
Oh yeah,
it's,
yeah.
trying to work in the personal lives of students with anxiety and depression and
Hmm.
stuff like that, or like I said, the party scene and what they're trying to get kids to do that,
Yep.
is
Yep.
not good for their lives, or just in other areas that I think other people
Yep.
would know that we're talking about, but we don't want
Yeah.
to get political. So,
There's
so
many
yeah,
different layers to this issue, but the fact of the matter
yes,
is that you know, he hates these kids and he's trying to destroy them in any way that he can. And seeing the light enter into that space, bring it on.
Yeah, and that's what, these kids have is they have a love for God, and they're doing the best they possibly can to
That's right.
get other students to share that love as well. I just think it's
Well, and
awesome.
if these young people can get fired up, man, there is no passion like the passion of a 20-year-old person that's on
Mhm.
fire, because of that stage in your life and just how deeply you feel things, to have that channeled towards the Lord, man, he can do wonders through people with that. So, yeah,
So
love it.
true. So true. All right, that's a good story to talk about there. We'll move on to our next one now. This one is not as nice and good as the other
Hmm.
one was, but we're gonna sandwich it with a good one. So don't be concerned. There will be another
Cool.
good story after this one. So Dan, have you heard of Gateway Church down in Texas?
Yes, I have. They're massive.
They are massive. We actually have used worship songs from their kids ministry there, in the kids ministry
Yep.
here, and I think you did one or two in chapel
Yeah, they've got some great
as well.
stuff. They've got some great
Yeah,
tools and resources.
yeah, fantastic resources. So, back in, I believe it was June, Robert Morris, the lead
Hmm.
minister there, he was either stepped down or fired. I can't remember exactly which one. He had some sexual harassment issues and some claims of, him coming upon other uh, workers and things like that for
Yep.
the church, and so he stepped down or was fired. Like I said, one of the two. Well, turns out that another staff member, the executive pastor of the church, has now been fired for undisclosed reasons.
Yeah.
Undisclosed reason. A portion of the statement pulled from YouTube is quoted here in the article. It says, "As of Monday morning this week, Kim Chow Glasgow is no longer employed at Gateway. We were informed last week of a moral issue which we believe as elders disqualifies him from serving in the role that he had at Gateway." The elder Trey Wilbanks, a longtime Gateway Church elder, said in a video announcement on YouTube. The announcement on YouTube is much longer
Yeah.
than that, so if you want to go watch it,
Hmm.
you can. They express love for him and his family and wish him nothing but the best and hope that he can be restored and that there will be healing for his family. So sounds like there was something involved with his family there. Anyway, we don't need to try and figure that out, but this is
Yeah.
obviously an issue. And then on top of that, that was an article from last week. An article this week comes out after Robert Morris scandal, former Gateway Church staffer is done with organized religion. A former staff member who they are protecting her identity in the article. They call her Jana Scott. That's obviously not her real name, as they're protecting her identity. She says that she's done with organized religion. She's done with church overall because of the way that
Hmm.
Robert Morris treated her and the way things went down there. A quote from her said, "In fact, I'll be honest with you, there's no one in my family that attends church anymore of any kind. It has destroyed our family." This, to me, both these articles, and obviously they are much longer than what I've read, but just
Hmm.
heartbreaking to me, Dan. I hate to hear
Yeah.
about failures of ministry, those who are in ministry, and then
Hmm.
obviously I hate to hear about how failures of people in ministry have turned other people away from the church, and not just them
Right.
from that church, but from all church in general, and friends and family of those people as well. So, just
Yeah.
tell me what's your reaction to some of this most recent news, and if I missed
Hmm.
anything you want to bring up.
Yeah. I mean, my reaction to it, of course, it saddens me to see these sorts of things. I mean, obviously, the Gateway is in full blown damage control mode right now because the whole Robert Morris thing, and unfortunately, because that did involve a minor in the past, that kind of ups the ante. I'm sure there are lots of really good people at Gateway, and from what the little bit of reading I've done, it seems like the elders are really taking this seriously, and they've got a lot of weight on their shoulders because they have such a big organization. I don't know the ins and outs. I'm not an insider there, but it is always sad to see, any kind of moral failure from a leader at the church. It is cool to see that they want to help him. They're not just ostracizing him. oftentimes in especially more insular church communities, there's this tendency to kind of, excommunicate rather than try to lead to repentance. And I think that occasionally there are events that happen which you can be disqualified from ministry. You can prove yourself unfit for the position. But when that happens, the church's first priority should be spiritual reconciliation. Even if you're not going to be able to reconcile the person to their position, you should at least try to come alongside them and help reconcile them back to whatever the problem was, bring them back, restore their relationship with the Lord, be a part of that process. That's our job as brothers and sisters in Christ too. So that goes beyond just the position of being a minister. As far as the article about the people that are done with church, I find that article to be both saddening and a little bit silly at the same time. Silly on the point of Christian Post, because why is that news? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They kind of made this article, and then the person that they talked to remained anonymous, right? So there's kind to me there's like a credibility issue with that article, and it's almost like, because, and I remember I made the comment to you the other day when we were walking in the hall that news organizations feed off of scandals,
Yeah.
right? And so that's how they monetize a lot of what they do. And so to me, this just looked like scandal fodder. Like, we got to keep the Robert Morris thing going, keep people's engagements. Oh, hey, there's a staffer that'll never go to church again, which is a horrible thing. I mean, then that's a terrible, saddening thing. And I hope that for the person who they were talking to over this, that it's just a temporary sort of knee-jerk emotional reaction that will eventually they'll soften up, and that they'll be able to reconnect with a church and reconnect with the Lord. But the greater thing that I think the takeaway can be from that article, whatever the motivation for publishing it was, the fact of the matter is, when these kinds of moral failures happen and when leaders fall, there's always collateral damage. There is always collateral damage. And you can look at that from a couple of different angles. I mean, you can put some of that on the shoulders of the leader himself, and there is some responsibility there. When we as leaders screw up, it's not just us that are hurt in the process. But I think from the other angle too, this causes both, us as leaders and, us as Christians, even, because there are people that I admire and I am influenced by. We're actually going to talk about one of them here in the next article. And we have to ask ourselves, who are we faithful to? Are we faithful to our leaders, or are we faithful to the Lord? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because leaders will fail, even if it's little ways, even if they say something rude while you're passing in the hall and they might not have meant to, but it really just hurt, or irritated you or something. Guess what? You're not going to like every single thing about any one person that right? We are all human. We all have the human condition. And so to me, the walk or the takeaway from this article with this person, who I really hope they're not done with church forever, but it's just, you really need to ask yourself, who am I faithful to? Because if I'm a follower of Robert Morris, if he falls, I fall. But if I'm a follower of Jesus first, he can't fall.
Right.
And so even if everyone else around me falls, I still have Jesus. So that was my takeaway from that article.
Yeah. I remember when I did camp teams, I learned that lesson pretty quick, not because anybody had
Mm-hmm.
done anything wrong or anybody had fallen, but when we did camp teams, and if you don't know what camp teams is, it's basically we were a group of college students representing Kentucky Christian University going to different
Yep.
summer camps all year or all summer long, and we were basically like fill-in camp counselors that they could ask to like teach lessons and stuff like that, and
Mm-hmm.
be small group leaders with the kids. And one of
Yep.
the things you realize very quickly was that like you can have a great impact on this kid's life for a week, but that's it. Like you can
That's
try
what you
to
got.
get the yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like you can try to get the kid's phone number and text them and help them afterward, but guess what? Like they live in Virginia, you live in Kentucky. Like you're
Yeah.
not going to really be able to help that kid all that
Yep.
much. And so, that really helped me kind of form my ministry style, which is like, I don't want the kids to be reliant on me. I want them to, more so, experience church in such a way that they're going to continue coming and have
Hmm.
a good group of volunteers who could be there, if anything were ever happen to me, the volunteers would be there for the kids to relate to and stuff like that. So, I mean, I think that's, one of the better things to do. Of course, thankfully that came from, not a scandal, but just kind of
Hmm.
experience from it all. But I think you're exactly right, Dan. I mean, these news companies oftentimes will just profit off scandals more than anything else. When you said that, I looked over at the side and saw, oh, there's a most popular section here on the side, and please don't hear me, going against Christian Post or anything like that here. I'm just using
Right.
this as an example. But under the most popular section, there is a senior minister at a church who resigned because a former volunteer was abusing minors. Another Robert Morris article. A pastor did something. I can't see exactly what it is because it trails off, but did something with money. So who knows what that
Hmm.
was. And
Yeah.
then Donald Trump, Mark Zuckerberg, and then another pastor is arrested. So,
Scandals sell. What can you say?
yeah. So, and at a certain point, like, I do think it's interesting to hear this kind of stuff. And I have a question that I think is good to kind of spark from this article. But I'm with you. I don't know what the fruitfulness of the news is in this one,
Yeah.
more often than not. So I guess my question to you, Dan, I'm reading through this article and them talking to this person so much, and kind of the common theme throughout it is just how much they hate megachurches. And
Right.
at the very last part of the article, it's kind of the first time that it even mentions another church the person went to. They said, I know so many people who have traumas and things from being a part of that, from a small church as well. In fact, I went to a small church before I came to Gateway, and at that small church, I was spiritually abused and found out later that the pastor was molesting someone, and he was living a double life. So, you finally get the mention of another church there,
Hmm.
but like, do you share that sentiment, Dan, that, all mega churches are bad and, get out of a mega church? And obviously it's not as cut and dry as that, but just kind of what's your
Yeah,
thoughts
that
on
this is a
that?
to me, this is a bit of a complicated issue. And mega church, small church, whatever it is. I mean, I don't personally have a lot of experiences with mega church, like being a part of a mega church. I've
Yeah.
visited many, right? And I've been a part of the worship, and I've been there, but I've never been a part of a mega church culture. And so I can't really speak a whole lot to that. I've known people who have, and but now most of the people I've known that have are people that have left mega churches to come to other churches, and there is a definite theme that we can see, as even if you just watch a lot of mega church preachers, there is this kind of theme where a lot of them are very, very focused on seekers and people that are exploring faith and that sort of thing. And so oftentimes they don't, in their most public messages, go super deep. Oftentimes it's very, very practical type stuff, and a lot of them rely on small groups to kind of delve deep into Bible studies and things like that. But every one of them is different. That's the thing. You can't, you know, you start looking into it, and all of a sudden it's an apples and oranges kind of thing. I think a lot of it um, is not necessarily a mega church versus small church, but it's just a church culture.
Hmm.
It's, whose system are we following to operate this church, and is the leadership in tune and caring about what the Lord has to say in terms of what the church should be about. I think it comes way more down to that than just how many people walk through the front door or are on the membership roster or whatever like that.
Right.
I've seen small churches that have been horribly toxic to their people. Um, Not a whole lot, but once again, a lot of it comes down to culture. The idea of spiritual abuse has become a much more hot topic over the last few years than it's ever been, because there does seem to be an uptick in churches that are engaging in exploitative behavior, And the main places that this seems to come out of are, I won't say mega churches, but I will say larger churches. You know, now, and that could also just be because larger churches get more attention. And so we hear
Right.
about them more frequently. I'm not saying that this is a large church problem. What I'm saying is that it is a church problem. And once again, as people who are part of a church, we have to just constantly keep the main thing to make, the guidance of the scriptures, that is our guide, to stay strong in our relationship with the Lord and continually go to Him for guidance and wisdom. I think that's really the key and the takeaway, not the size of the membership roster.
Yeah.
To me,
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. I think that was a really good way of putting it. I think in our next story, there's a really good example of how church size really doesn't matter. If you look at the
yeah,
picture of this church, this is not a mega church. I mean,
nope.
this church, and so there's an entire story with this, but I'm trying to find the name. I've forgotten to highlight it when I was. Did you catch the name of this church, Dan?
The altar. It's the altar,
Oh, the Altar Fellowship. Okay. So
and
it's a
I've heard of this church
non-denomination.
before. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, you have heard of it?
I have. Yep,
Okay.
actually, yep. I know of the pastor. I'll tell you about that in a minute.
Okay. The Altar Fellowship is a non-denominational church in Johnson City, Tennessee, led by Pastor Matty Montgomery and his wife Candace. Montgomery is an
Hmm.
evangelist and the author of Scary God and Lovely Things in Ugly Places. So there's an entire story here of what went on. I don't, think I have necessarily time to give you the entire story, but essentially this church raised $8 million to pay off medical debt for a number of people in their community, and one of the people in the community was the father of a boy who was coming to church there by himself. His family was not coming with him, and his family started attending after the whole thing. Obviously, they're not paying a
Right.
bunch of medical debt just to get somebody to attend church. There's obviously the love of Christ there and trying to serve their community. However, that was just kind of a really nice piece to the story of like,
Yeah.
it always connects back, and just a lot here talking about what Montgomery said and just the entire situation for what went on. My article is frozen for some reason, so I can't continue down
I
looking
had
at it.
trouble
But
loading that web page too. For it kept
yeah,
kicking me back, and so it
I
didn't
don't know what
surprise
the
me.
deal is. But anyway, Dan, what are kind of some of your thoughts here? And if you want to tell us your connection with the minister there.
Well, I don't have a strong personal connection. I've met him before. You see, Matty Montgomery, for many years, probably close to 10 years, was the lead singer for the Christian band For Today. And
Oh yeah,
so
okay,
my band played with them a couple of times, and more like shared the stage with them. We never went
yeah,
on tour or anything like that. We just happened a couple of times by chance to be on the same stage as like the local band when they came through. That happened once, and then another time we happened to be on the same stage at Cornerstone earlier in the day than they were. So there was, and I've shaken hands with Matty Montgomery just one time. So I don't know him, but I know of him. The reason I know of him is because he was one of the most outspoken, blatantly Christian people ever to walk into that industry. And
really,
so he made a lot of waves, and I always appreciated him. He's written some of my favorite songs of the last 15 years. Just awesome, absolutely sold out Christian brother. Awesome guy. Love the guy. So this is his church now because the band's finished. They finished their run, and so now he's pastoring this church. And what they have done here is just I think it's awesome. I just think it's awesome. And also the $8 million in debt. What a lot of us don't realize is that all money is funny money, right? And so the article actually states that the church bought $8 million worth of debt for $50,000. So they're out. They actually spent $50,000, and that's one of the things that oftentimes we don't realize is that our debts are actually just assets to these companies that hold them, assets to be able to collect on. And so the church spent $50,000 and was able to just pour this huge blessing on their community, you know? And I think that kind of radical stuff, is something that I would never think to do, right?
Yeah.
Like, whoever had this idea, it's just genius. Um, and and it's a great opportunity to be able to truly speak hope and love to the people around you. That's the thing I always struggle to do. It's like, how do we look at our community and how do we really, really show them that they are loved? You know, and this kind of thing. Oh my gosh, I got to be careful what I say. There's a lot of people that I know this would rub the wrong way because there's so many times, and as Christians, we tend to be, generally speaking, more responsible people, because we have a high sense of morality and generally higher sense of ethic. I shouldn't say higher. That makes it sound like we're better than. But our ethics and morality are determined by the Bible, which hold us to a high standard.
Right.
Okay, because God's standard is a high standard, and so sometimes I think there's a lot of us that would be tempted to look at this and say, well, that was a terrible thing to do because those people owed that money and they should have to pay back that money. And why should the church spend $50,000 on these people? They got themselves into that situation and they should dig themselves out again. You know what I mean? But
Hmm.
as I was reading through this article, a thought struck me, and I don't think I made this up. I think my brain dug this up somewhere from my past, but it was that, what is the purpose of the church? Is the purpose of the church to teach people personal responsibility, or is the purpose of the church to show people the love of God? You know, what do we think is going to be the more effective method of showing people the love of God? You know what I mean? I remember when I was a kid, I knew so many people that thought part of what the church should be teaching kids is good manners and etiquette, because part of being a good Christian is having good etiquette. That's not in the Bible anywhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The idea of cleanliness is next to godliness. It's not that cleanliness is bad, but it's not a commandment. You know what I mean? It's like we
Right.
get our wires crossed so much. And yet, this is a radical example of a tangible thing that blows people's minds. And it's like, okay, you just got a glimpse of what the love of God is like manifested in your life. It is this radical and life changing and crazy. You want more of that? We got that here at church. You know what I mean?
Well, and for some people, like you talk about grace and saving somebody's life. I mean, I've been there before where I got a bill that, and it wasn't a medical bill, but I got
Hmm.
a bill and it was a substantial amount of money that I had no idea how I was going to pay. And
Yeah.
there was a church that came alongside me and assisted me in not only paying it off, but helping me pay it
Hmm.
off, but also helping me organize my money in such a way. I, I,
Yeah.
I will never be able to say thank you enough for
Right.
what that
Sure.
church did,
Absolutely. Hmm.
because in that moment when I opened that bill, I thought my life is over. Like
I'm
I
done.
thought,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I know the feeling.
like obviously I'm going to keep living, but
I'm
I will
done.
forever be paying off this debt. And this money is just always going to be siphoned out of my, income, whatever I make for the rest of my life. And, you know, that is no longer the case. And so there are a group of people out there that had so much baggage and has so much debt. And now the church can write a letter. I mean, just like how they got the bill that said, here's how much you owe,
Yep.
they have a letter that says you owe nothing. And
Hmm.
what a fantastic, I mean, that is literally the picture we get in the Bible, paying off your debts, paying your debt for you. Jesus
Yes.
paid it all, right? I mean, that is
Yep.
literally what the picture is. And for somebody to say just in a short letter, hey, Jesus loves you, we
Jesus
love
loves you.
you,
Hmm.
and it's our privilege to cancel your debt entirely, like, I mean, I hear what people are saying on, like, yes, we need people to be responsible, and I do think that responsibility is good, but you're
Hmm.
right. Nowhere in the Bible does it say thou must say please and thank you. Like,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
that's not in
Hmm.
there. And so I do think that we need to teach people and help people, but at the same time, the most important thing is showing them the love
Right.
of Christ. And I think
That's
this
right.
does that for so many people, in particular the family that the boy was able to bring to church with him.
Exactly. Well, and you think about the parable of the king who canceled the debt of his servant, right? And then his
Yep.
servant instantly runs out and goes to somebody that owes him a few bucks and, throws him in prison. We are the person in the middle.
Yeah.
Jesus is the king. We are the person in the middle, and then, the
And
people we're
some of that
trying to
comes from
reach.
jealousy. Some of that comes from jealousy
Yeah,
too, because
well,
I
yeah.
guarantee there's
Hmm.
people out there that said, "Well, I had to pay all my debts."
Right. This
Like,
isn't fair. No, it's not. But that's the beauty of grace. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Um,
yeah.
it's
But
that's the beauty of grace.
we are called to be happy for those who are happy. Rejoice with those who
Those who
rejoice, and
rejoice and weep
weep
with
with those
those
who
who
weep.
weep. Hmm.
I mean,
Absolutely.
that's a verse
The
I
the
have to quote to
idea
myself all the time.
the idea of you know being unable. How do I put this? The idea of needing God to intervene, to cancel our debts, and then to pass that love on is a core tenet of what we believe. That is what he wants us to do. I just don't know if I've ever seen that played out in such a tangible, radical way as this. I mean, this blows my mind. This
Yeah.
this really just blows my mind. I think it's so very cool. And when I saw Maddie Montgomery's name, I was like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. Just because I've seen what the guy's done in the past, and he's
Yeah.
a pretty radical guy. But I'm sure this wasn't all him either. I mean, this is his church, and I once
Well,
again, I just think it's fantastic.
and that would be the most beautiful part about it, is if it wasn't all him. If this was,
Yeah, yeah,
just, I mean, imagine you're at an elders meeting and one of the elders is like, "Man, guys, there's a lot of people in our community that are struggling with medical debt." And another guy perks up and he says, "Well, hey, what if we only pay $50,000? We can get rid of $8 million in debt." It's
yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah, and I think that that's very valuable. I would hope that the conversation wouldn't really switch to what I said earlier. It's like, well, those people should, we always find ways as Christians to rationalize things, and
yeah,
or I should say, as people, not necessarily as Christians, but that people side of us, has a tendency to rationalize and look down on and judge, and yet Christ. And then once again, I got to challenge myself with this too, man, because I got some of this thinking in my brain that's been programmed in there. Because and this is just another testament to just how radical what Jesus taught was. I mean, when you
right.
really start breaking it down, like literally, he took everything that we just kind of consider to be normal and he flipped it on its head. And this is one of those ways. This radical idea of passing on grace. I just, yeah,
Grace isn't meant
so
to make
cool.
sense. I
So
mean,
cool. No.
true grace, it doesn't make sense just because of how
And
awesome
for
and
it to be
compelling it
and for it
is.
to be grace, you have to not deserve it in the first place. Otherwise, it's not grace.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Exactly. So, all right, Dan, I think that was a great discussion there, and I really enjoyed, well, I enjoyed two of these topics. One of these topics I didn't enjoy so much, but I think, it's important to
yeah,
address and talk about.
we got to know what's going on though. That's part of the problem,
Well,
even
and
good or bad.
I forgot to say this with the second one, but far from me to prop up our church and say that we're anything awesome, because I think we're really things we're doing here are very very good, but I do think it's important to be thankful for and worship God that we are at a church that not only has a number of ministers, but we all get along. I believe we're all
Yeah, we're very
faithful.
blessed for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe we're all faithful with trying to align for the same goal of, sharing the love of Christ, guiding people home, that
Hmm.
kind of stuff, and everything there. So again, not saying we're perfect, certainly not perfect, but I'm very thankful to be a part of a church and work on a staff that uh, is organized that way.
So am I. Very
Yeah.
thankful.
So, well, speaking of the church, Dan, you got anything going on in the worship ministry right now you want to talk about for people before we get out of here?
Just the same thing I always say. If you're looking for a service opportunity, I need people to. I could really use some more folks upstairs, helping to operate sound and slides, that sort of thing. It is not complicated. I can teach you, especially the media part, like with the slides. It's literally a mouse pointer and a single key on a keyboard. It's very, very straightforward. But it's also a tremendous help. It's a tremendous help. And I could use a couple more people to do that. If you want to go a little deeper, I do need another sound person or two. I prefer if you had a little bit of experience with sound, but even if you're a person who's just an avid music fan, I could probably teach you how to do this pretty darn well. So, yeah, just a couple of opportunities right there, and just always praying for more people.
Yeah. We're thankful for Chelsea this past Sunday, helping lead with
Yeah,
the
she did
team.
awesome.
Ellie and
Yeah.
Jim and Dan was up there as well, of course, with all the
Yep.
musicians. So excellent job by them, and thankful for them. Country Day.
Absolutely.
You need people for Country Day?
We will soon. I'll get back with you about that one on the next podcast.
All right, next podcast, you'll hear more about it, but be thinking
Follow
if you
up.
got anything for Country Day. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Dan, for coming on and talking about these subjects with us. We will catch you again next week on FCC Talk, releasing every Friday. See you next time.